so you're seen as a cost.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the challenges remain no matter sort of where you are, but ultimately it's one of those things that isn't, I hate to say it, it is seen quite often as a necessary evil. And I think the businesses who really do get it right and invest well are the ones that see it's not all about money, it's about that bigger picture of risk. And I would always make sure, if it wasn't one of my team, it would be me. I would be picking up the phone to that company and saying, hey, you've just reported no near misses for the last 5 years. Don't believe you.
Mm.
And actually, that's a red flag. That would be a red flag for us. So we know a lot of the workforce are suffering from chronic stress. And there's a thing called the amygdala hijack. And so basically when we're under that chronic stress and pressure all of the time, our body goes into the fight or flight response.
Yeah.
Now, when that happens, our body has this really clever capacity to shut down the systems in the body that aren't needed for fight response. Because those functions that are getting shut down are the things that help your cognition and help your critical thinking and help your risk perception and helps you with your decision making. And it's your immune system what keeps you healthy. So all of a sudden, you've then got people who are sat in this fight or flight mode, who aren't thinking clearly, haven't got very good risk perception, haven't got very good decision making ability because of their state of mind. So you're more likely to have accidents, and also you're more likely to have sickness absence because the immune system isn't working properly. So
Yes.
it's this perfect storm need. If the current statistics of those deaths every day is not enough to kind of push us in the right direction, I don't think a guidance document is gonna change things.
Join us for your weekly deep dive into the beating heart of UK construction. From groundbreaking projects to game-changing innovations, the UK Construction Podcast brings you face-to-face with the industry's brightest minds and boldest thinkers. Each episode features candid conversations with construction leaders, architects, engineers, and on-site experts who share their hard-won insights and behind-the-scenes perspectives. We cut through the noise to deliver actionable intelligence on market trends, emerging technologies, and the forces shaping British building.
Hello, everyone. Joining me today is Beth Slade. Beth is on a mission to make health and safety less about paperwork and more about people. With years of experience across construction, she helps businesses stay compliant while building stronger, safer cultures. And she's just launched Safety Shift, a new program tackling psychological risks head on. Today is 12th of October, 2025. Thank you very much for joining me on this Sunday, Beth. How are you?
Hello. Oh, it's so lovely to be here. So thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you.
Good, good. Yeah, it's great to have you on. So let's start off by telling us about you, what you do for, we're giving the listeners a bit of a summary. So let's delve into that, expand on what you do for construction companies.
Yes, so I set up Beth Slade Safety Ltd a little while ago now, and it was kind of born out of an idea to make safety simple but meaningful. I have spent many years, so about 20 years now, in health and safety across various high-risk industries, but my roots are very much in construction. And over the last sort of few years, I've been working a lot with lots of kind of smaller construction companies who really want to do the right thing when it comes to health and safety, but they don't always know what that is. And they just need that support and that bit of guidance just to make things simple, because I think we all understand that health and safety is quite a difficult topic. There's a lot of legislation out there. So what I do is just support businesses with really kind of understanding what the requirements are when it comes to the law, and making it really, really simple. So meeting people where they are on their journey and supporting them and empowering them to have the confidence to understand it more. And that's all about just breaking it down, making it simple, meeting them where they are. And then the other side is making it meaningful. So you can have lovely policies, RAMs, and all that documentation, but ultimately, if you want to prevent accidents on site, you need to bring your team along on that journey with you. So that's the meaningful bit. So it's about culture and transforming culture so that we don't just sort of tick a box with compliance. We're actually making a difference in keeping people safe on site so they get to go home at the end of the day.
Brilliant. Love it. So you mentioned it's mainly smaller companies. You work for the tier one companies at all?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So the previously, before I had my consultancy, I was working with a lot of directly with a lot of smaller businesses who were kind of were making that move into using consultants, but they weren't always kind of getting what they needed out of it. And that's where I kind of saw that I could really make a difference and help people. But yes, no, my client basis is very, very mixed. So I work across all different sizes of businesses. And again, it's just about meeting them where they are and supporting them on their journey.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So can you give a couple of examples of what a company would contact you for?
So that's a really interesting question. If I'm being totally honest, what you tend to find is that you don't get called in until something's gone wrong, which is it's always a challenge because that's not when you want to be called in. It kind of changes the focus a lot when, if there's been an accident on site or the client has discovered something that's not quite right when they've come to do a visit. I mean, that's not great for the contractor at all to kind of be told by a client there's a problem. So that tends to be when people will make contact. Or it could be that a business is going for a large scale tender and there's certain thresholds they need to meet with their health and safety. So they at that point realize they need some support. So we can support businesses through that process to make sure they've got everything they need in place to be able to be successful in submitting a tender. So it really, really varies. And then we've also got that other end of the scale where you've got kind of the newer startups who maybe have been running things themselves for a while, have kind of just muddling on through, and they've got to kind of a point in their growth where what worked before doesn't work anymore, and they kind of need more in-depth support to kind of really understand those risks and what's going on maybe with bigger teams. And they might need more training and kind of elements like that. So it's a real big mix of kind of at what point we would get contacted, which is lovely because it keeps it really interesting.
Yeah. So how would a company find you then? How would they even know where to look for that sort of thing?
So we have a presence online, so you can find us at bethsladesafety.co.uk. You can find us on LinkedIn, you can find us on Facebook. Um, so yeah, we're quite easy to find. And we sort of, if you go onto the website, you can get more information around the exact support and the different industries that we work with. So yeah, we should be quite easy to find, I would hope.
Okay. Good. But what would you search for? Like if I was a company thinking like wanting some help, what would I actually search for?
I think what people tend to search for is sort of health and safety consultants, health and
Right.
safety support, tendering support, competent person, advice, those kind of things tend to be what people tend to search for. And obviously with the world we live in now with AI, so AI is pretty good at kind of pointing you in the right direction when you sort of start asking questions.
Yeah.
Companies like us will pop up as well.
Sure. Yeah. 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 So in your 20 years of experience, what's the biggest change you've seen in the health and safety culture in construction?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked that actually, because I think it's really important that we reflect back. And you're probably like me, you've seen a lot of change in the industry over the years. Dare I say, sort of 20 years ago, I started my career as a building surveyor, and there weren't very many women around. It was very different back then, and there was a lot of harassment and things going on. So it's really nice to see that there's been a big increase in the number of women in construction. But we've also gone through a lot of changes with legislation as well. Back then was when things were happening, like the smoking ban came in, and we had the CDM regs being created. So it was a really big change. And I think over the years, we've got a lot better at controlling risks on site, especially some of the really big ones. And it's really interesting because I kind of think back to that time, and there's stuff that would happen then that you just wouldn't dream about now. I mean, like segregation of pedestrians and plant and transport on site, or our kind of approach to asbestos is back then. People that were doing apprenticeships weren't really taught about health and safety. I mean, my husband included. I know a lot of people back then that were exposed to asbestos during their apprenticeships, and that's mad. I mean, to me, that doesn't feel like 20 years ago. Like I still think I'm really young, but yeah, it's amazing really how far we've come in those years. We've come so far. Definitely with how we manage health and safety and people's perceptions of safety on site, and what we would deem okay to do now. We wouldn't go and rip off an asbestos sheet roof now like we would have done 20 years ago and not even thought twice about it. So yeah.
Yeah, I have to admit it's something I've done myself,
Yes.
like working for a one-man band,
Yeah.
just you just crack on and do these things, don't you?
You do, yeah.
Yeah, so and that's the thing, like all a lot of these companies, especially the bigger companies, they've got people who can sort of regulate that and keep an eye on that and say, look, what you're
Yeah.
doing, but these smaller companies don't.
No,
So it is important to sort of implement that culture of your safety
absolutely.
where it filters
Yeah.
down to smaller companies.
Yeah.
It's hard though, isn't it?
It is. And I think I was liking it to like starting any new business. You wear so many hats. And you have to learn very, very quickly how to kind of, dare I say, be a jack of all trades. I mean, my thing is IT. I am absolutely useless at IT in my business. So, although I've been amazed at what I've been able to achieve with like the support of AI myself, you get to a point where you have to outsource something. You have to get that external support in, and it's tough for those smaller businesses in construction because you don't always have the budget to be able to get that support. And that's where things like the monthly subscriptions that you can pay for kind of a library of, a suite of all the health and safety documents you might need that you can just sort of go in and download. That's where that kind of becomes very appealing to those smaller companies. And that's great if you've got someone in-house who understands how to do a risk assessment and to kind of risk assess on your sites and within your business. But when you don't have that, that can actually be more damaging. And you don't have the budgets for training, and training is a huge part of that culture shift on site. And we all know there's lots of pressures in construction, and time is money at the end of the day. And that's one of the biggest barriers we face in construction is in kind of changing the culture and bringing people along on the journey, is that we don't necessarily have the budget or quite often the time to be able to get teams sat down in front of a computer or sat in a meeting and actually doing that kind of hands-on training to kind of make sure that everybody's kind of staying on top of their skills and their knowledge. So yeah, it's a real big challenge, and I think that's the challenge with smaller businesses. But as you get to bigger businesses, that there's still challenges there of why we can't necessarily get it right all of the time.
Yeah, you make a real interesting point there about um, budgets. I mean, for a smaller company to sort of approach someone like yourself, is there any funding that is available for them, like in terms of grants or anything like that?
No, there isn't, sadly. But I think it's one of those challenges, isn't it? Is that the health and safety, even in a large scale, and even in a tier one company, should we say, for example, in construction, they'll have a health and safety department,
Yeah.
but they will still have challenges around budgets because I've been in those situations before. I've been heading up kind of health and safety for large businesses, large scaffolding companies, and you have very similar challenges because you don't make any money in that department, you're not making the revenue there, so you're seen as a cost.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the challenges remain no matter sort of where you are, but ultimately it's one of those things that isn't. I hate to say it, it is seen quite often as a necessary evil. And I think the businesses who really do get it right and invest well are the ones that see it's not all about money, it's about that bigger picture of risk and
Mm.
reputation, and kind of all of those kind of things need to be thought about as well. So yes, it can be challenging. But I think as well at the same time with consultants, when there's some out there that give us a bad rep, but we're pretty good people, and we're always able to support. Even if a client came to me and they couldn't afford to sort of have me on a retainer, I would still support them and point them in the right direction, signpost them to where they can get that help that would fit their budget. And um, there's also people who offer pro bono work, who offer reduced rates. So I would always say it's always worth having a conversation with a consultant, even if you think you can't afford it, because you don't know until you try. And there's always things that can be done and other avenues that can be explored. So don't ever just completely shut it down. Go and have those conversations, because we'll always do our best to support any business that comes to us, because ultimately this is about improving safety across the industry, and it's much needed. So if there's something that I can do to help or the team can do to help, we will 100% do that.
Sure. But why would they give you a bad rep?
I think some consultants have a bit of a bad rep, and I think that's probably because it's probably twofold. It's probably a mix of kind of old school health and safety, which you would have come across in your time, I'm sure,
Yeah.
as most people probably have. And there's definitely a shift towards how we approach health and safety in the industry now, but there are some people that probably have quite an old-fashioned approach still to it. And that works great in some areas, but it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So I think that's probably one of the challenges, definitely. And I also think it's probably a bad analogy, but it's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. Um, you wouldn't, if you were running a construction project, you wouldn't go to a heating engineer or a plumber who didn't have a gas safe certificate, or their certificate had expired. You wouldn't go and use them for your project. And it's a bit like with consultants. There are a lot of us around, and we all have different expertise. So I think sometimes we don't necessarily go to the right consultant for what we need, and that's kind of really, really important. If I give you an example, 20 years ago at the start of my career, I the first thing I learned in health and safety was how to be a fire risk assessor, and I used to do hundreds of fire risk assessments. I don't do them anymore. I have sort of trusted people in my team that do them for me. And the reason I don't is because there's been so many changes in legislation, particularly around Grenfell and kind of what came out after that, that my level of competence in that field isn't as strong as it was back 15 years ago. So I have people in my team now who live and breathe fire safety, and that's all they do all the time. So they're the people that will go out and do that work for our clients. And I guess that's the point really, is with some consultants, it's about making sure that they are competent to be able to deliver what you need. Do they have the right experience in your industry, or in the particular work that you're doing? Do they have the qualifications needed within that kind of industry? And have they worked for similar construction businesses as you? Those things are all really, really important. And sometimes I think if you don't pick the right consultant, you're not necessarily going to be getting what you need. And I think that's the other side of the coin of where potentially we can get a bit of a bad rep.
Sure, yeah, I suppose it's like anything really, isn't it? Any kind of trade, if there's good and
Yes.
bad, and the bad ones are kind of known or remembered more than
Yeah,
anything else, aren't they? So I mean, I'm sure you don't please everybody in your work.
we try.
Yeah, but you know, there's always somebody that's going to be sort of not happy with something or other. So that's kind of what gets remembered, isn't it? But
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good point. So I think you might have answered what the next question is. Is there a moment or incident on site? Oh, probably not actually. Has there been a moment or incident on site that's taught you a valuable lesson?
I learn every day, and I think we never stop learning. That's so kind of important for us to be able to grow and to be able to kind of move with the times. Um, I think probably one of the things that stands out for me, and it wasn't like a massive incident on site. It was something that taught me about the importance of how you communicate and the language that you use. Um, I was working with a client a few months ago, and I had gone to site I kind of met the senior managers many times, but it was my first time going to site. And I was talking to a supervisor, um, and they asked me a question to which I kind of responded and gave them an answer to. And they just sort of looked at me, and I wasn't sure where the conversation was going to go. They looked at me and sort of said, "Thank you." And I was like, "You're welcome." And they said, I've been trying to get an answer to this question for about 2 or 3 months now. Our in-house compliance team couldn't give me an answer. Our previous consultant couldn't give me the answer. I've met you and known you for less than half an hour, and you just explained it to me in a way that I understand, and I can now take away and give that answer that the team need. Um, so that was a really good lesson for me because I'm sure those other teams had probably said something very similar to me, but they hadn't said it in a way that landed with that person for
Hmm.
them to really understand it. So, yeah, for me, I talk to a lot of different people at lots of different levels within the industry, but it's how you communicate those messages that is really, really key to that understanding.
Yeah, I imagine it's trying to keep everything in really simple terms, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, that comes
Yeah,
back to the whole motto of making safety simple yet meaningful. It's, you
yeah,
know, there is definitely, and I think again that's another change in the industry. There are definitely, from everything I've seen in the last few years, everybody wants to do the right thing. They just don't necessarily know what that looks like. And
yeah,
it's our job as kind of the professionals in health and safety to be able to really explain those complex things in a
yeah,
way that people just get.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Because there's a lot of buzzwords flying around, and then there's a lot of technical terms, and I suppose there's a lot of people who um, want to look better or sound cleverer than what they are and stuff like that. Makes maybe a little bit
yeah,
of ego involved. Where yeah, it's important just to keep everything. That's why when with my website, my blog and stuff, I put information out there. I'll get a lot of feedback saying to me, Jim, that was so easy to read. It's so simple.
yeah, yeah,
Just because I just sort of do it how I talk. Just you know,
exactly.
I don't use
Yeah,
big words. So yeah, yeah, cool.
yeah,
I like
that's so
that.
important.
What about when you first walk onto site, what's the first thing you look at that tells you that how strong the safety culture is there?
So I maybe call it intuition. I don't know. So I'm a auditor for ISO 45003, which is
Yeah.
the health and safety standard. So and I for most of my 20 years I've been auditing and inspecting, sites. So yeah, you could maybe call it from that background, or maybe it's in some intuition to an extent. I can spot a mile away what the culture is. Before you even get to site, the conversations you have ahead, how the process goes of actually arranging a site visit, how it goes when you get to site, how you're inducted into site, the conversations you have. It's very telling early on. How people engage in conversation, how they show up in those conversations. You can tell if a show is being put on for you. But one of the things I really like to do, as I'm kind of going around and sort of asking questions and kind of being guided to kind of the setup, is I quite often like to touch on emergency procedures. And I'll sort of, ask questions about kind of what the process is and what's the approach if this happens or this happens on site, what happens. And quite often I'll be told, oh yeah, we've got a process for that. This is what we do. And so what I'd like to do at that point is just say, okay, when was this last tested? And they'll go, oh, yeah, they'll either say, oh yeah, it was very, very recently, or oh, it's been a little while. And I'll say, okay, well, let's test it now. So I like to put them on the spot and be like, let's just do it now. And then see the reaction is always really, really interesting. Are they open to it? Are they like, oh, well, I'm not too sure. So, and I'll kind of try and coax them when they're not too sure and be like, what's the worst that could happen? Should we just give it a go, see what happens? We're not
Yeah.
gonna, there's no risk or anything. We're not gonna do any damage. Let's just see what happens. And yeah, so that's always really telling as well, is because 9 times out of 10 the process they've just told you, this is what would happen. You test it and it doesn't happen. But it kind of it really helps people then get into that mindset of what we've got in writing doesn't actually happen on site. And that's the thing I see time and time again is that we've got great processes. We've got a health and safety policy that might be great. We've got RAMs, but actually what is happening on site isn't what's in those documents. And that's that tick box kind of culture, really, of, at the end of the day, you can have all the documents in the world, but if the people on site don't understand those and aren't working to them, then it's absolutely pointless and it's not going to prevent something from happening.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. It reminds me of when I'm at work sometimes, you kind of know when there's like a visit sometimes
Yes.
because sort of everyone's on edge.
Yeah.
There's sort of more management around, and you think, oh, what's going on here then? And sometimes I might get on the radio, Jim, I
Yeah.
know you do a good job, but just do what you do. But, we've got people walking around today. I say, okay, yeah, no worries. It reminds me of like a like an Ofsted visit at school.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
they
yeah,
all just get really panicky, like, and everything's all prim and proper. Yeah.
yeah. And that's what I try and avoid. And it's quite difficult in construction to do unannounced visits. If I can, I will. But yeah, I try and avoid that whole just, we're on edge. And what I will quite often do is because I will quite often get invited to maybe like the briefing in the morning, like or a toolbox talk first thing. And I will actually always ask if I can just have a couple of minutes to talk to everybody, just to kind of let everybody just breathe and just be like, we're on edge because there's a health and safety person here, and it's like, no, just relax. I'm here
Yeah.
like to just observe and support you, answer your questions. I'm not auditing you, I'm not inspecting you. I'm literally just here as a support. Come and talk to me. And this is what I'll always say is that I want to talk to as much of you as many of you as I can. So please, like, if you see me during the day, come and, if you're free, just come and say hi, let's have a conversation. Because we're really not scary. We're really not.
Just human beings at the end of the day, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's breaking down that barrier. That's really important because we're not going to get anywhere if there's going to be a barrier there. So it's
yeah,
it's breaking down that barrier is really important.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about the point system. So, from what I understand, companies secure a lot of their contracts through the point
Yes.
system. So the more points they have, that
Yep.
higher chance of getting. Well, what do you think of that?
So I'm going to give you a really raw, honest answer. Um, we've sort of touched on a few things as we've already been talking. We've talked kind of around the kind of the tick box kind of approach to health and safety. Now, my feeling is that actually you're probably familiar with the SSIP accreditation process.
No,
So, oh, you're not?
no,
Okay. So, most large scale clients now, and a lot of the smaller clients actually, will require a contractor to have an SSIP accreditation to actually get through the first stages to be actually approved to tender for a project. And what that means is, so SSIP accreditations are things like construction line, safe contractor. I don't know if any of these are ringing a bell. Um, there's a number of accreditations which sit under the umbrella of SSIP. And what that's been set up for, it's safety schemes in procurement. So the idea of that program is that if you hold one of these accreditations, your health and safety approach has been audited against a standard that's recognised within the industry, and it gives you a nice big tick in a box to say that you have everything in place that you need from a health and safety perspective. So when the client is scoring your tender, if you've got one of those SSIP accreditations, it's going to get a tick in the box, so you can then move on to the kind of the next stage. So a bit like the point system you were just talking about. Now, that can actually do, in my opinion, that has done more probably damage than good in the industry in relation to health and safety, because those accreditations can be in some instances quite easy to achieve with the very generic health and safety documentation. So it drives that culture of just having a document in place more than actually stopping and making people think, actually, hang on a minute, do we have the right competence in place? Are we actually assessing the risks on our sites and within our business? That message is still getting lost within that process. So I understand why there is a point system, and there does need to be a point system. However, that is not really a good indication of where a company is at with regards to their health and safety management process.
So do you think the accreditation should be made much harder to achieve?
I think some of the accreditations are stronger than others, and I'm not going to name them because that wouldn't be fair.
Yeah.
But some of them are harder to achieve. But they will look at things like, do you have a health and safety policy? Do you have risk assessments and method statements in place? Do you have emergency procedures in place? Are you training your staff? Do they have the relevant training that they need to be able to deliver the work? But it's very high level, very, okay, you've got this document, you've got this document, okay, tick in a box, you're kind of on the right lines. But that's not really judging what's going on site, what the culture is. There's so many loopholes in that process of, okay, you might have had asbestos awareness. That might have been relevant 6 months ago, but it's now expired, so you haven't got it anymore. So it won't pick up those kind of things. And it doesn't really go into detail looking at like your accident or your incident data. So a lot of the industry is still driven in that process around how many accidents you've had. But actually, what's really important is how many near misses have you had?
Mm.
Because the near misses are gold dust in really understanding what's going on site. And there's something called the bird's triangle, which shows, again, I don't know if it's something you've heard of, but for every so many near misses that you have, the likelihood of you having an accident on site increases. So if you're not capturing those near misses and learning from them, you're not going to be preventing an accident on site. So that's why it's really, really key to report those near misses so that the health and safety team can really understand what's going on site. Now, I can guarantee there are near misses going on every site, every single day that go unreported. So again, it's that culture of kind of making sure teams understand that that is so important to capture that information, because if we can prevent somebody from having a serious accident on site and potentially someone could be left severely disabled, or worst case scenario could die, we've got all of this information is available to us, we're just not using it. So that's where it's really, really key. And I do a lot of work with my clients around near miss reporting. But again, we don't need to make that complicated, because we know we're all busy people in construction. So that there's really, really simple ways we can do that reporting process, so it's not putting a lot of pressure on those people on in on the ground in the trades that have already got so many other pressures on them. It's about how we make that easy for them and make sure it's an easy way of reporting those near misses. So we're really driving that data and really understanding what's going on.
I'm really glad you brought up the reporting. I've spoken to a few people that have had some quite major incidents.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the point system is designed to encourage people to not report incidents and near misses because they don't want to lose their points.
Yeah, absolutely. So in one of my previous roles, I used to we had a subcontractor model. So my team used to do the vetting on the onboarding. So as soon as we onboarded a new contractor, we had like our own accreditation process that I designed. And it was really, really interesting because one of the questions on there was around how many accidents have you had? How many near misses have you had? How many kind of riddle reportable incidents have you had? Going back to over a 5-year period. And you could guarantee everybody would just put 0, 0, 0 in every single box. And I would always make sure if it wasn't one of my team, it would be me. I would be picking up the phone to that company and saying, hey, you've just reported no near misses for the last 5 years. Don't believe you.
Mm,
And actually, that's a red flag. That would be a red flag for us, and that would get flagged during that process to say, that says to us straight away, you're not managing your instance and your instant reporting process on site successfully.
mm.
And then what we would then do is work with that contractor as part of their induction process and be like, hey, this is why this is really important that you report these near misses, and just bring them on that journey. And through that process, what we actually saw was before we had that induction process, the level of near miss reporting across the network of subcontractors, which was at about 300 to 400, um, was very, very low. And then we improved that induction process and did a lot of campaigning around the importance of near miss reporting. And then we actually got the near miss reporting up to a really sort of good level where we could really understand what was going on site. And then we could make sure that we were training and giving out that support to the network around changes to our processes, our policies, our risk assessments, our method statements, all those kind of little tweaks. So most people will say they'll only review a risk assessment once a year, but throughout that process and that near miss reporting, we were updating our RAMs probably once a quarter as we were seeing those trends that were happening. And that was nationwide as well. So we could pick up on those trends on site of what was happening and then just update and tweak our processes so we knew that we were preventing accidents further down the line.
Yeah, you're really putting yourself out there then. It's good. Yeah.
It's so important, isn't it? And I think when you have a platform like that where you're working with a lot of different companies across the industry, you've got to be really, really sensible with that platform and
Yeah.
make sure you're using that in the right way because you have the ability then to make a very big difference and a big impact on the industry. So that's really, really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about the pressures that a company might be put under. So that's another good point. Do you think there's a danger of companies being put off by compliance because of getting lost in all the paperwork and stuff like that?
Yes, I think there's synergies across lots of different industries with regards to kind of pressures and demands and why people probably might not be able to achieve full compliance or maybe not take health and safety as seriously as they should. Um, but I think in particular with construction, there is such a time is money ethos. Um, and there's some kind of things that are very, very specific in construction that probably hinder that. And like we sort of said earlier on, health and safety, if you look at kind of the HSE and the legislation and the guidance, I mean, they do a fantastic job at producing a lot of wonderful guidance documents. But in construction, that is so overwhelming for somebody because there's just so much information there. And that's why really it's so important to have access to either an in-house team if that's something your business requires, or an external support, kind of network, or just having somebody that can really make it simple for you and cut through. I mean, something I've seen as well, which always makes me smile, is when I review I review hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of health and safety documents over the years, thousands over the years. And one of the things which always makes me smile is health and safety policies. So the amount of contractors who I've spoken to who I'll have a look at their policy and it'll be 200 to 300 pages.
Wow.
And they are really, really proud of it. So obviously I don't want to go in with the wrong kind of approach, but I'll sort of say to them that that's great. Like someone spent that time doing that. But I'll always follow up and say, who's actually read it?
Exactly.
Because if nobody's read it, and this is always the challenge as well. So when I come in and I'm like, okay, I'll review your health and safety policy for you, and it's 300 pages. I'm like, I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to sit there and read 300 pages. So, and health and safety is my bag. So who in your company has actually read that document? And
Yeah.
again, this is where it comes back to that old kind of tick box thing of health and safety doesn't live in paperwork, it lives in your team.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, we know it's not an interesting subject for most people. So if you're not going to expect someone to read a 300-page health and safety policy, you know, you're setting yourself up to fail immediately.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people don't even read terms and conditions, do they, properly? Like, they just think, just scan through it. Yeah, that'll do. So, yeah, up 100%. I mean, when I get a lift plan, when I go on a new
Yes.
job and I have to sign a lift plan and the books like that, and it's just
Yeah.
like some people just go, just show me where to sign, please. Like,
Yeah.
show me the back, and you do that. So, yeah, that
But
is really, that's a good point.
but
Go on.
that
Sorry.
there, you just hit the nail on the head right there. Like, you know, people are just going to sign at the back and go, yeah, where do I sign?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of really interesting because one of the things that I always do with the risk assessments, you know, it's those little tweaks. So what quite often I will do with clients is that we'll have a risk assessment, and then on the first page we'll have like that point of work risk assessment. So we've got the risk assessment we've done, so we know, take scaffolding for example, we know what the main hazards are going to be when you go to site. Um, when you get to site, because a week or two may have passed since we've done that risk assessment, we will ask the supervisor on site to say, okay, when you get to site, just look and see if anything's changed on that site. And that point of work risk assessment I've seen sometimes sits at the back of the main risk assessment. People aren't going to look at that.
No.
So what I will say is let's move that to the front. So it's the very front page. So it's the first thing they look at when they get to site. They see it. It reminds them that they need to do that before they move on. It's those little things that really help to engage the team, and there are very small kind of nuances that will be different for every single business. So that's why it's really important that you really understand how that business works and how those individual teams work as well, because you can have disparity across teams. And then just making sure that whatever you're putting in place works for them on the ground, because you know a great 300-page document is brilliant, but ultimately, if the people on the ground doing the job that are the ones that are facing those hazards and those risks on site, if they can't use it easily, it's absolutely worthless.
Yeah. Yeah. But do you find the policies are pretty generic anyway throughout the companies?
Yes, and I think again it comes back to that whole kind of train of thought that we have access to a suite of documents online. We pay every month for it, and then we'll just kind of pull the information off that we need.
Yeah.
You know, those kind of systems are great and they have got a place, but you've got to have somebody looking at that information and making sure it kind of reflects what's happening on the ground. You know, it's otherwise it is just that tick box, and it's not going to stop an incident happening on site. Okay, you might be able to rely on that document and kind of present it as a defense in court, maybe, but it's got no real value. And I think that's kind of one of the things I always kind of keep at the front of my mind, and I say to the team as well, is that you've always got to think about what value are we adding here.
Mm.
And that's what I say to clients as well when I'm kind of reviewing information. I'll say, okay, well, what value does this bring? What's it bringing to your business? Um, because if it's not bringing any value, why are you paying for it? Like why what's the point? And again, it comes back to that education piece as well, and the understanding, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so, I mean, obviously, it's really important, but all of this embedding the proper procedures across the field. But do you find that the real smaller companies are harder to reach?
I think actually over the last few years, I think there's been a definite shift with the smaller companies. They definitely want to be doing the right thing. Um, because I always think at the end of the day, like construction is a hazardous industry. It's not like you guys wake up in the morning and think, yeah, I'm going to go and do a job today. I'm not going to really worry about falling from height or, injuring myself. Of course you think about those things.
Hmm.
Um, there's definitely, I see a lot of positives in the industry right now. Definitely. I've seen that turn, especially over the last 20 years, but even more so in the last few years, that people really do want to get it right. It's just accessing that information to understand what is right.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are the fact? I mean, could you list some of the factors that could make a company not comply?
Yeah, and I think we've probably talked about some of this already. I think with the smaller companies, it's always about money and not having the budget to be able to necessarily have that support. I mean, smaller businesses don't necessarily need somebody in-house to manage their health and safety. Um, but that they don't necessarily have that budget to be able to have sort of a consultant on board. Well, they might not think they've got the budget. Um, and I think as you get into kind of the bigger companies who would usually have those health and safety teams, their challenges are probably at the other end, which is around quite money to an extent, but it's more around you're not making us any money. And I would say with the larger companies, a lot of it comes down more to that training piece. Um, and that perhaps that disconnect between a health and safety team in an office and the team out on the ground.
Yeah.
And actually, are those teams coming together and really, really understanding what's going on the ground? And are we investing in the right type of training? Because I think sometimes with the bigger companies, it's very, very easy to rely on online training. And Toolbox talks are great, but as we know, Toolbox talks are very short. So they're fantastic as refresher training. But when it comes to things like manual handling, for example, is huge in construction. Um, you're not going to engage people by putting them in front of a screen and getting them to watch a video. I think there is a place for that kind of training, but I think in construction it's quite limited. I think what we need in construction is that time, which again is that pressure, is the time to be able to have that kind of physical hands-on training that is very relevant to your site and what you do, because again that varies across the industry. And I think sometimes that is a challenge for the bigger companies and the smaller ones to an extent. So again, we're coming back to it's that culture and changing that culture on site and bringing those people on the journey. And I think we still have that disconnect between office and on the ground.
Yes, I'm going to bring that up later actually. But yeah, that's a good point with the training and videos and stuff, particularly like site inductions and that. Like the amount that I've been on, and they just stick a video on and walk out and look around, and everyone's there either on their phone or they're
Yeah,
trying to stay awake, and it
yeah,
just needs to be a lot more interactive, doesn't it?
exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of what we do with we're sort of we've just been developing a big program in psychological safety shift, and I'm smiling because on my desk right now I've got elements of the training. So we work really hard to make everything interactive. So I've actually got some Lego on my desk at the moment, which is part of one of the training bits we do. And we're always like, how do we make it engaging? How do we make it interactive? How do we make it interesting? Because health and safety on the whole, unless you're a geek like me, is not interesting to most people. So it's how do you bring that in? And um case studies as well are a really good way of kind of engaging people, because there's a lot of like um very well known disasters that have happened in our lifetime, and slightly before that time, that people are aware of, but people can really relate to. So bringing those in and talking about those, and one I really like to talk about is Piper Alpha, the oil rig. But yeah, there's lots of different things to bring in. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Is sticking a video on, like you say, it's not going to engage people. And if you want to make that long-lasting change on site, you need to engage people in a process. So yeah, I'm not discounting, like we said, there's a place for that online training and those videos, and it's a good way of mixing up the different kind of training genres and things. But yeah, ultimately it's people to people. That's how, in a room together, that's how you get
Yeah.
the most out of training.
Yeah, and it's about picking the right people to deliver the training as well. I think that
Yes.
goes back to communication as well. I think it reminds me of a site manager I worked with once in Manchester. Every time, so we worked on nights, so everyone was kind of like tired and not really up for it.
Yeah.
And every time I didn't even know who the guy was for the first 2 weeks. I just thought, who is this dude coming in? Every time he was just like a presence, and it was just like, whoa, he was just there, and it's like energy, energy, energy. And I just thought it was amazing. And we used to take the piss out of each other. And that was only like a couple of weeks later, someone said he's like one of the top bosses. I was like, oh, wow, okay. Um, but he said like his site inductions, he just gets so involved and picks
Yeah.
people out and does things and, tasks and stuff like that. And that's just the way to do it. Really is.
Yeah.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor, Webb Motion Media.
Are you ready to transform your online presence? At Webb Motion Media, we're not just another digital agency, we're your partner in digital success. Our expert team delivers results-driven SEO that puts you at the top of search rankings, stunning web designs that convert visitors into customers, and data-backed PPC campaigns that maximize your ROI. Plus, our conversion rate optimization ensures every visitor counts. Don't just take our word for it. Our clients see an average of 40% increase in online revenue within the first 6 months. Ready to elevate your digital game? Visit our website from the links below this video, or call us today for a free consultation, and let's turn your digital dreams into reality.
Absolutely. And we all have different ways that we learn best.
Yeah.
There's not a one size fits all. So that's the other thing that we always do, is that when we sort of work with a client initially, we'll talk a lot about kind of what training have you done previously, what's worked, what hasn't. Let's get a real understanding of the team, and then we then know how to structure that training to make sure that it lands right.
Yeah.
Um, because like we said, ultimately that's how you move things forward, and that's how you make sure you've got those safe sites, is by engaging the workforce, and making sure that they understand it, and totally get why it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to sink in. It's got to sink in. Are there any policy changes or emerging trends in health and safety that companies might not be aware of?
So, um, yes. So it's always one of those difficult, how you just worded that they might not be aware of. And I think what I've probably learned over the last sort of 6 months, as we've been doing Safety Shift, is that there is not an awareness around the requirements around psychological risk management. So about 6 months ago now, I kind of posed a question around mental health and psychological risk on site. And that was, what if we started treating psychological risk the same as physical risk? And what if we stopped reacting to mental health on site and actually started preventing it? because there's lots of figures that get banded around with regards to mental health. And we know psychological risk is very high on the HSE's agenda now. It has been for the last couple of years. And I think the one statistic that really got me and has stuck with me is the fact that we lose 2 workers in construction every working day to suicide. That to you now, I find that really difficult. Um, and that is just the situation in construction is 4 times worse than any other industry. That's not okay. Like we've really got to do something fundamentally different to what we are doing now. So that's kind of 6 months ago, kind of where I was at with things. So Safety Shift is about tackling the psychological risks within construction on site before they impact on people's mental well-being. Now, we can't change people's home lives and mental health and well-being is impacted by lots of different things. So we can't change people's home lives, but what we can do is we can design out the issues within construction that are having a negative impact on people's mental health and well-being. So that's what Safety Shift does. It's a 12-week program where we start off by looking at a risk assessment, but a psychological risk assessment. So we spend a lot of time, we go in and we work with those construction businesses. We really we hold focus groups. So we literally go into that business and we talk to everybody, and we really work really hard to really understand that business and understand what is going on in that business and what are those kind of psychological risks that are going on that are causing an issue. We then work with that business, so we come up with an action plan. We work with that business to support them with putting, much like you would with a normal risk assessment, so putting control measures in place to control those risks. And then we work to build a wellbeing team. And that's kind of the in-house kind of peer champion support teams. We train them to be mental health first aiders. And I'm working with one of the top mental health companies in the UK. And so we train them, we support, because we know at the minute that mental health first aid, as great as it is not working long term. It's not having an impact. I was in a call the other day where the HSE was saying even in general, OC health provision in construction is not where it needs to be. The number of deaths a year is not where it needs to be. We've still got a real systemic problem. And we know that a lot of people, so it's around 90% of organisations now invest in mental health first aid training. But what happens is you've got these people who go into the training, they're really energized and they really take the role very seriously. They go back to site, they don't have support, it's not embedded, and it doesn't have the impact that we thought it was going to. So we take it much further. So we train those champions, but we also train them to be a bit like the traditional health and safety rep, but for mental health. So as soon as there's a policy change or, I don't know, a process change or a change in how shift patterns work or, any kind of change, those champions are the voice of the teams, and they're able to have those conversations in the right way with the decision makers to say, hey, actually, I don't think you've thought about this from a mental well-being perspective. These are our thoughts. So you've got that whole consultation. So you end up with this whole embedded psychological risk management strategy for long-term sustainability. And then we also have we provided a 12-month add-on wraparound support. We track the return on investment because we know that around 51 billion a year is wasted and is lost to kind of sickness with regards to mental health and kind of all those things. And then we also offer other kind of bolt-on packages to that's kind of a bit like OC health employee assistance programs, but that's relevant for construction and what people in construction would actually want. So I think that is probably, in answer to your question, the biggest issue at the minute that I don't think the industry really fully understands. And the HSE are very, very clear that psychological health and well-being is right up there with the physical kind of risks. And psychological well-being and mental health sits within the Health and Safety at Work Act and the Management of Health and Safety at Work regs. The HSE have started investigating claims where psychological risk isn't being managed correctly. So it's only a matter of time before we see those first prosecutions coming through. We've also seen, going through the courts, many civil claims that have been successful for hundreds of thousands of pounds. So this is a really, really big issue that companies need to be really understanding and ensuring that they're managing those psychological risks more effectively.
100%, 100%. So this has been rolled out. You've been doing this, have you? This course, yeah? Okay.
No, so we sorry, no, we are literally we launch in a few days' time.
Right. So has it been trialed or piloted at all?
Yes, so we've had quite a lot of interest. It's been a very interesting time. Obviously, I can't say loads of details at this phase, at this stage of the program, but we've had a lot of industry support with some different associations. We've had like a lot of sort of focus groups and talks around the design and the development of the program, making sure that we've considered kind of different parts of construction, because I mean scaffolding, I always see scaffolding as like, although it sits within construction, scaffolding has a very unique set of demands and ways of working that is probably quite different to traditional kind of construction. So we've designed it very much with those things in mind. It's been designed in such a way where we can roll it out on a site basis. We can roll it out for the larger tier ones on a kind of a kind of a branch area of kind of the country. So it's nationwide. So yeah, we've taken in a lot of feedback. We've talked to a lot of different people because we really want to make sure that we are set up for success. And you know, ultimately it's about ensuring that long-term sustainable solution that comes from inside the business. So whilst we're there and we're on that journey with those people, we are setting them up for longer term success on their own. And also what was really, really important for me was that price wasn't a barrier for any business within construction. So we have 3 tiers of packages that we offer to get around that. And our higher package offer is fully compliant with ISO 45003, which is the standard for psychological risk management. So yeah, we've done it in a way that we want to be able to reach as much of the industry. So anybody who comes to us and wants to do this, we've hopefully developed our packages so that everybody can benefit.
I think that's really important, actually. Yeah, definitely. Yes, because I mean, I'm gonna thought about doing stuff for mental health myself in the future, and the things that have been going through my mind are: do I make this free so that more people can do it?
Yeah.
But do I need to make money? How do I do this? So that's really important. But can you name some of the psychological risks?
Yes, and just before I go on to that question, I just wanted to say as well, we will have an initiative where the bigger companies can pay it forward.
Right.
So, because we know, like when you start a business in construction, it's such a stressful time, even more so than it, you know, we know it's a stressful industry, but it's even more stressful, and that is kind of when your mental health in particular could be impacted even more. So that's why I want to do the Pay It Forward initiative. So those large companies can invest in the companies that maybe perhaps can afford the foundations package, but they want to move on to our blueprint, but they can't quite get that budget together. So yes, that's why the Pay It Forward initiative is really, really important as well.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea. I like that. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, So you describe Safety Shift as not a workshop, not a poster campaign, but a management system. Can you unpack what that means in practice?
Yeah. So kind of a little bit of like what we've sort of talked about already. So we start with the kind of getting to know the business. So it's we do sort of focus groups, surveys, sort of we kind of come all in. There's a few of us. So we come in and we're like, we really want to get to know you all. So we start at the top, obviously with the kind of the directors, the board, whatever kind of that setup looks like. And we have those initial meetings with them at their level to really kind of understand things. And we kind of do a bit of a site readiness assessment. So that's to make sure really that we think you're in the right place to be able to start this journey with us. And it might be that we say there's a few little bits and pieces that you need to have in place first. So we'll say, you know, get those things in place and then we can start the program. We then go on and we start meeting everybody. We come to site, we kind of observe, see what's going on, talk to as many people as possible, and we'll have those conversations around what's the best way to do that for that particular site. So what works, you know, what works for that site, what doesn't, because we want to get that real honest, raw feedback. So we do all of that initially. And then that's when we start to really put that psychological risk assessment together. So we're looking at all of those things in the business, how you work, what the relationships are like, what's your kind of staff turnover rate, what's your sickness absence rate that's related to mental well-being, how are those relationships working, how do you manage things like if somebody raises an issue, you know, if someone raises something around bullying and harassment, or, you know, how's that being dealt with? All of those kind of things. And then we create the psychological risk assessment, we create an action plan. And then at the same sort of time as we're doing that, Jo, who's my partner on the mental health sort of training and support for the wellbeing team, she starts to get that wellbeing team ready. So it's okay, who, you know, have we identified people already that would be interested in being in part of the wellbeing team? How do we recruit those people? So that's kind of where she comes from and her team, and kind of building that kind of that team together. We then work on the action plan from the risk assessment. So we fully support that process of making that change and changing that culture and bringing people on that journey, which is really, really key. We set up the KPIs, so what we're going to monitor that return on investment. And then we do a session with the champions and building that team. That's very fun and interactive. And this as well can be delivered in whatever way works, because obviously there is that pressure in construction about time away and time being money. So we can structure that to suit that construction business. It is really bespoke in that way. And then we do the 2-day mental health first day training with that team. And then we do some follow-up training, reflection sessions, and other bits and pieces with the champions and support them sort of longer term. We then do company-wide training. And that's when we kind of really get that buy-in from everybody. So everybody understands what this is all about. We talk about all the findings from the risk assessments, where we're at, what we're doing. We get sort of the leaders of the business in, so they're talking so that the people on the ground really understand that this is embedded and it's really important to everybody. So we kind of build that buzz in, and then we let the champions then do their thing and start having those talks and having those meetings. And we just provide that kind of support to see how things are going and kind of check in with them. And then we kind of just monitor how things are going, and the support package at that point is bespoke depending on what's needed. And then at the end of that program, we do kind of like an evaluation and next steps, and kind of we look at where we want to take things from there. And there's various different ways we can move forward together. But yes, that's kind of like the kind of main 12 weeks. But we will not walk away until we know that team, that wellbeing team, are really confident in what they're doing. And we will always be there as needed to kind of have that reflective time, or, you know, if something's happened and those champions are really kind of struggling, it's okay, what support do you guys need? What do we need to be able to give you? So it's fully supportive. But yeah, the idea is that we take the business on that journey and get them to a point where they've got a full sustainable model in-house, with support from us as and when they need it.
Yeah, cool. Regarding the peer champions, what would happen if one of them sort of moved on to another company? Would
Yeah.
they just sort of contact you to retrain someone else?
So yeah, really, really good point, and that's really kind of important. So from a an outside perspective, that's great because it means they're taking those skills and that program onto another business within construction. So we're getting that message out further of this kind of different approach to managing sort of the psychological well-being on site. Um, that as well is why we train a minimum of 10% of the business to be part of that wellbeing team, or a minimum of five, depending whatever number's bigger, to make sure that you have always in that business got that cover and have got that team there. And the other thing I would say as well is that the champions aren't there to be the be all and end all of the program. They are there to support, to nurture the program, to I guess kind of empower people and lead the way. So the program will not break down if a champion leaves.
Right.
It's embedded in such a way that the impact of one champion or two champions leaving it isn't going to be significant, but it will have that obviously that longer term knock on impact within the industry as they move on.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good. That's good. You mentioned some of the things that could affect the mental health as well, like sort of forget what you said now, bullying and a couple other things. What other factors could come into
Yeah,
play?
I think we know a great deal of what the issues are. Like we have a really good understanding. And if we just focus on construction at the moment, we know that payment terms are a big issue within the industry. There's a big divide between contractors and subcontractors. We know there's a lot of demand for working away from home, and working very unsociable hours, with tight deadlines, working weekends all week, not getting breaks. And we also know we have a big issue across the board in this country with loneliness.
Yeah.
Um, and what's really sad is that that's becoming a big issue in the younger generation. So that kind of generation of younger people that are going to be coming in and doing apprenticeships, a large proportion of them are going to be really struggling with loneliness.
Right.
Um, and Jo, who I mentioned earlier, who is my partner on the program, um, she talks, and she could talk to you about this a lot better than I could. But we know as well now, and she told me this, and I couldn't believe it. But it was one of the statistics that stood out for me was that in families where you have a parent working away from home, it's that wider effect, not just on that worker, but the family. And there is a much higher incident rate of teen pregnancy when a
Oh,
parent is working away a lot.
wow.
So it has such an impact um, across families, and
Yeah.
that loneliness thing. It's really sad that we've got a generation now, a young generation that are really, really struggling with loneliness.
Yeah. I never thought about that actually. That's a really important point.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, everyone gets lonely at some point, don't they? But yeah, it's a good point. You mentioned timescales and stuff like that earlier. I did a post the other day on LinkedIn. I don't know if you saw it about people falling behind. I see it all the time, like subbies going behind on projects and stuff like that, which does
yeah,
happen. But like
yeah,
I said, it's sort of like it creates this sort of thing where they try and squeeze more work out of people, cut breaks down, and watch
yeah.
over and sort of time how long things are taking and stuff like that. And I think that has a big impact as well. Kind of ruins morale and gets people down.
Absolutely. And we know we've got a big issue with stress. And we know that stress has this massive impact on how people show up, whether that's
Mm.
in their home life or in their work life. And there's something that Joe explains very, very well, and I'm going to try and explain it, but I won't do a very good job. But I'll try and do her proud. Um, so we know a lot of the workforce are suffering from chronic stress, and there's a thing called the amygdala hijack. And so basically, when we're under that chronic stress and pressure all of the time, our body goes into the fight or flight response.
Yeah.
Now, when that happens, our body has this really clever capacity to shut down the systems in the body that aren't needed for fight response. So it will shut those things down. But when you're in kind of that chronic stress phase and you're feeling stressed all of the time, it means you're constantly in fight or flight, and those
Mm.
systems have been shut down. Now, those systems are really, really important for functioning, especially in construction in a hazardous area, because those functions that are getting shut down are the things that help your cognition and help your critical thinking and help your risk perception and helps you with your decision making. And it's your immune system what keeps you healthy. So all of a sudden, you've then got people who are sat in this fight or flight mode, who aren't thinking clearly, haven't got very good risk perception, haven't got very good decision making ability because of because of their state of mind. So you're more likely to have accidents,
Mm.
and also you're more likely to have sickness absence because the immune system isn't working properly. So
Yes.
it's this perfect storm. And when you look at accidents that people do on site, they're always like, "Oh, it was just a silly mistake.
Mm.
I just wasn't thinking." Um, and but a lot of that's for a lot of the reason that is why is because we have become so stressed
Mhm.
with life and those pressures. And in construction, the stresses are huge
Mm.
on people. That it's yeah, it's a massive issue. And again, that's why we've created Safety Shift, is that we've got to make a difference, and we've got to make a difference fast.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's great. Yeah, it's a good point actually about the body. Yeah, your body does communicate with you, doesn't it? If you ignore it too much, it will start saying, okay, well, I'm going to do this then, like do something. It manifests into physical aspects. Do something with
Yeah,
your heart or whatever else that you have to take
absolutely.
notice of. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
definitely.
that's the other side why I found it really interesting the other day, where the HC was sort of saying that health isn't where it needs to be in construction.
Mm.
And it's those kind of things that if you had that regular health screening as well, in
Yeah.
construction, those kind of things would be being picked up on, but sadly they're not.
Yes, that's true. That's a whole nother subject. That isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, So you mentioned earlier ISO, is it ISO 45003? Is that right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Right. So that I didn't realize that there was a standards for mental health. So that's the standards for mental health. Is that right? Yeah.
That's the standard for psychological risk management. Yes.
Right. Okay. So moving on to the next bit. Um, I mentioned another post about, I mean, you're probably aware of construction support people like that who are quite vocal on this. There was we'll move on to an exclusive on this as well with you. But there was a summit next door to me where I'm working at the Gherkin, where the Construction Leadership Council and BM1 and various people like that. And Steve from from construction support is saying that there should be legislation in um, mental health to regulate all these risk factors and stuff like that. And but the CLC didn't really seem that responsive to it. Um, I think they've just come out and said they're having another consultation soon. What do you think of that? Because although there's standards in place, surely there should be mental health police to regulate those standards.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and the CLC at the moment are currently consulting. So they've got the mental health project running at the moment. So they are consulting the industry, and they are trying to reach the entire industry. So I would definitely encourage everybody to be joining in and participating in that consultation, because it's really, really key to hear everybody's voice, because we've got such a diverse range of businesses, and people's individual situations within the construction industry, that it's important we're picking up on everybody's views on this. But my understanding is what they're trying to do is to really understand. I mean, they've got early data at the moment around kind of the current situation in the industry, but they really want to make sure that they're fully understanding all of the issues in relation to mental health in construction, with a view to releasing their findings and some guidance in the spring of 2026.
Okay.
So I think that's going to be a really interesting initiative to follow, and to see the campaign and see what comes out with the guidance at the end. I guess we do have a lot of guidance already around mental health at work. We've got the HSE, who have got the kind of the 6 management standards around how to manage stress. They've got a lot of guidance around kind of mental health. And the government commissioned a review back in 2017 around mental health at work. So it's not new. It's not something that we're only really just sort of thinking about guidance wise. We've got the ISO 45003. Sadly, that though doesn't have the same status as the other ISO. So ISO 45001, for example, you can be accredited and receive certification for that ISO. You can't currently with 45003, which is really disappointing. It is guidance only. So what I would really like to see is for that to have the status upgraded. With regards to kind of legislation and things, the HSE have been really, really clear. Psychological risk sits under the Health and Safety at Work Act. It sits within the management of health and safety at work regulations. So I think from their perspective, it's already covered. But
Right.
what with most things is at the minute it's not clear, because if you look at things like asbestos or manual handling or COSH or vibration, you have another set of legislation, and you have approved codes of practices and documents that the HSE produce, which kind of tell you exactly what you need to be doing to meet the regulations. We
Yeah.
don't really have that to an extent for mental health. So it would be really interesting to see this guidance that comes out in the spring next year, because I'm hoping that's what that will be, and that will become the go-to. But I would also say, with the ISO 45003 and the information we already have, ultimately, how we're going to manage the risk at work is through risk assessment.
Right. Yeah.
Ultimately. So,
Yeah.
that's what Safety Shift does. It starts
Yeah.
with that psychological risk assessment. And the
Yeah.
HSE are really clear at this moment in time, you must risk assess psychological risk in the workplace. So we know what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we're waiting for, and what else we need. If the current statistics of those deaths every day is not enough to kind of push us in the right direction, I don't think a guidance document is gonna change things. We have everything we need right now to make that difference.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just too many grey areas at the moment, aren't there, in the guidance and that. Yes. So you mentioned the other day that you could be working with the Construction Leadership Council on something. Can we go into that
Yes.
at all?
So I think the Construction Leadership Council were really, really keen to hear from people who wanted to support this mental health project, and
Yeah.
that's something that we fully do support, and we've talked to them about that. And yeah, it's early days at the minute, because they are very in the early stages of that consultation, but we are absolutely 100% supporting it, and we'll hope to be able to contribute to that consultation and kind of the outcome at the end.
Good. Well, I have to say, Safety Shift sounds like a proper little gem. It really does.
Yes, I mean it's groundbreaking. There's nothing else out there that exists
Yeah.
that will deliver what the program is set out to deliver. I feel very passionate about it, as does Joe, and everybody else in the teams that are working around us to deliver it. We feel very passionately, especially around the male suicide, and even one death a day is too many. and we will continue with the program, and we will keep tweaking it and making changes to it as time goes on. But we will carry on until we start to see that statistic falling in the right direction. And I hope in sort of 3 or 5 years' time, we can sit here and have another conversation about it,
Yeah.
and we can talk about how successful it's been, and kind of the impact, and all of those kind of things. Because it's for me, it's the most important part of my job right now, and it will be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, brilliant. It's really good. The more people that can get involved with things like this, the better, I think. I am seeing a
Absolutely.
small change, but yeah, the more people get involved, the better, because it will send the message out there to the masses and to the people upstairs to make changes. Definitely, definitely. With
Absolutely.
regards to that and your and the day-to-day work, you mentioned the coming together and the connection between management and the people on the ground.
Yeah.
Um, how how do, say, like somebody's running a site, how can they get this message across to the people on the ground and maintain that?
Which message?
Well, everything that you do in in
Okay.
your assessments
Yeah.
and your courses and the safety shift,
Okay.
because the safety shift, that I'm assuming is um so that's aimed at everyone, isn't it? That's not just aimed at contractors. It's aimed at everyone, yeah. So that's for
Yes.
them to implement a culture within on their site. So how do
Yeah.
they get all these messages across to the people on the ground, to the subbies and stuff like that?
So I always think it's engagement is key. So I always think if you've got a problem on site, the best people to fix that problem are the people that have the problem and are on site and are on the ground and are doing the job every single day. So our ethos is always, whenever we do a risk assessment or we've got an issue we've been asked to look at, we always go to the people on the ground and we have a conversation with them and say, right, tell us, explain it to us,
Mm,
explain what's going on, and then tell us what you think would fix it. So I think it's about involving people and using those resources you've got. Like, there's no point reinventing the wheel. You know, you just need to talk to people.
mm,
People will come up with an answer. Do you know what I mean? Like with your job, if you've got an issue, you probably know how to fix it,
mm.
right?
Yeah. Well,
Most of the time.
I'll make up as I go along, to be honest.
But if you had a situation and there was something that needed resolving,
Yeah,
you'd want to be part of it, wouldn't you? You'd
yeah,
want to be part
absolutely.
of the solution.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think that is how you bring people on the journey and you make those changes, is that you bring people in and they become part of the solution.
yeah, yeah, I agree with that. So the thing is, in an industry where sort of like deadlines and stuff come into play and budgets, and there's such strong pressures, how do you get the decision makers on board, particularly those who are sort of like fighting against it?
Most of the time, if a company has reached out, they're not going to fight against you
Right.
as a general rule. Probably the bigger challenge is around getting into the room with them in the first place. If you're in
Yeah.
a room with the directors or the board, it's because they know they need a change.
Mm,
Um, and I think for me, it's about always being very open and honest about the kind of current state of play. Now, a lot of health and safety professionals will take the view of scare tactics. So, this is kind of where you're at, and these are all the things that are going to happen to you if you don't sort yourself out. There's that kind of like,
yeah.
I'm going to scare you into realizing that you need to do something about this. I don't take that approach. I'm very honest. I'm very open, and I can be pretty direct as well. Um, but I think it's it's about being realistic, and it's about understanding how that business works, what kind of their priorities are, and talking to them in a way that aligns with kind of how they run their business. And I think if you can do that, and that's not always easy, I think if you can do that, they get it,
Yeah,
and they start to really kind of understand it. But sometimes, you do have to have those conversations and say, look, if you had a HSE inspector come right now, you're probably going to be served with a notice, because
yeah, yeah,
they need to understand. And I think that's the kind of really important thing, is that if something goes wrong, the responsible person for that business needs to understand what that looks like.
yeah,
What that looks like when they go to court. What are the possible outcomes from that? Um, and you can bring in kind of case studies of things that happen within the industry. So, if you've got a construction company that has gone through and been prosecuted for something similar, you can have that conversation and say, okay, so this company up in such and such an area of the UK, back last year, this had a similar situation. This is what happened. This is what happened through the courts, and this, this is what the outcome was. Um, so you kind of you just talk about it in their language. I think that's how you kind of you make people understand. But yeah, ultimately you're going to be in situations sometimes where people really don't get it, and in those situations you have to walk away, and that's not a nice place to be in, because you don't want to leave people open.
yeah,
You
yeah.
kind of, you want to support people. So I've never walked away from anybody yet, so fingers
Good,
crossed.
good. No, that's
I
good.
never
That's good.
will, but
Well,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully, yeah. Good. That's great. Well, I think we're on our last thing now. I mean, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your frankness as well and your honesty. It's refreshing, really is.
But
But
we don't get anywhere without that, do we?
no,
It's
exactly. Transparency is key, isn't it?
yeah.
The last question: when you look back at everything you've achieved so far, what's the one moment or result that's made you think, yes, this is why I do what I do?
Safety shift.
Oh, okay.
Safety shift is, and yeah, we're literally just on that launch. But
Yeah,
for me, I look at the time right now, and I think this is what I was supposed to be doing with my career. This is
yeah,
100%. Everything I've done up to this point has led me to this, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't. I'm incredibly grateful for the career I've had. But I wouldn't be here right now launching Safety Shift if it wasn't for the last 20 years. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. And yeah, this is my calling. This is what I'm meant to be doing. Definitely 100%.
I can see that. I can see the passion in it as well, and it's great.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, some people have to have these journeys, don't they? And it's not a meaningless. Some people might find it's a meaningless journey. It hasn't been a meaningless journey, have you? Because you learned a lot from it and you've helped a lot of people. But um, now that you know that, now that you know that this is your calling, what's going to happen with the other work? Yeah,
I will carry on. I have a team around me that allows me to be able to kind of carry on with the business as it is, and
yeah,
kind of moving forward. And I've worked really hard to build the right team of people around me, because I don't just take on people to be a health and safety consultant. They have to have a very unique set of skills, and they have to have a very special and specific approach. Um, so I've been very, very lucky with the people that have approached me wanting to work with me. I feel very privileged that those people want to come and work with me, and want to be in our team. So yeah, I won't be letting any of my clients down. I will still be carrying on with those other injuries, because I do work outside of construction, and I love doing that. I work in other high risk industries. Um, and yeah, I'd love to take Safety Shift out to offshore, would be my dream. I would love to do that. And I've already had other people across other industries who want to talk about Safety Shift and look at how it could go into their businesses in other industries as well. So um, yeah, there's a lot more on the table, and we've got big plans for the next sort of 3 to 5 years that we're looking at. So yeah, it's an exciting time. But yeah, we are very much building a team around us that believe very much in that culture shift and that safety shift program. And yeah, we will continue to push for as big as reach as we can across any industry and to anybody who wants our support. Absolutely, 100%.
Brilliant. Well, listen, I wish you every success in the world,
Thank
and
you.
I'll be really interested to hear what happens in the future, how you go with it and stuff like that.
Let's have
Yeah,
another chat again in a year or so's time and see where
yeah,
we're at.
I'd love that. I'd love that.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Well, again, thanks very much for your time, Beth. It's been
No, thank
brilliant,
you.
and I love doing these because I learned so much about so many different things and so many different industries and so
Yes.
many different people. So you've taught me a lot, even in the research that I do. It teaches me a lot. But you've covered a lot of areas here. So thanks for that. Hopefully, other people who are listening have learned from it as well and take
Yeah.
something away from it. Yeah. So
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
it's an absolute pleasure. What are you going to do for the rest of the day?
I don't know. It's horrible weather here.
Oh, is it?
It's awful. Yeah, it's raining.
Oh,
It's pretty dull. So probably just some more work around getting ready for our launch. So we launch in a few days' time.
yeah.
So yeah, I've got my Lego bits on the side and other bits and pieces what we're doing. So yeah, good just kind of pushing through for the launch to make it as successful as possible.
Great stuff. Well, good luck with that. Go for it.
Thank you.
We'll speak to you soon then. Yeah, you take care.
Thanks very much. Nice to chat.
Yeah, likewise. Bye bye.